like scary movies?
Uh-huh. I'm getting ready to watch a video.
You making popcorn?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite?
I don't know.
You have to have a favorite. Talk to me. Talk to me.
Hi everybody, I'm George, and this is the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made. According to our guest, at least. And today's guest is the final member of Gotti to make his solo debut as we celebrate Gelati. Please welcome my friend and yours, Dennis Wilson. How's it going, buddy?
George, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be on the show and to talk about the best horror movie ever made.
Thrilled to have you, dude. Very excited. As I've mentioned, I'm a big fan of Gotti, so I'm thrilled to finally get you in here solo, talking about an amazing, amazing movie today.
George,
and for once, not Gotti.
I know, and I know that I'm the gangster movie guy, and I know that we messaged a lot back and forth about the most gangster-themed horror movies, and I know we talked about movies like La Cosa Nosferatu. Mm-hmm. I know we talked about movies like Frankie Stanino, the Italian Frankenstein.
Of course.
We talked about the Mafia mummy murders.
Right. My fave, personally. I was pushing for that one hard.
We almost talked about and almost landed on the Hitman's Exorcist and the Satan Father, but those just all seemed too obvious. Mm-hmm. So in the end, we picked a different movie.
That's right. But why don't you tell us a little bit about where your history with horror all started for you, besides just the Mafia ones?
Sure. You know, I wasn't always into just Mafia movies. But so, yeah, I'm a very much a typical raised by TV kid of the 80s. Growing up, I would always see like bits of Jaws, The Warriors, like Alligator, you know, that were edited for TV. And I even remember like watching a full edited for TV version of The Fog. And coincidentally, always seeing, you know, big chunks of Poltergeist on a Friends or, you know, Neighbors HBO. But the first time I purposefully sat down to watch a full horror movie was Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 1. And I can pinpoint the date almost. It had to have been at least before July of 1987, which is 1 month away from my 11th birthday. And I know this because I saw Summer School in the theaters, the movie about the guy who teaches summer school. I can't think of his name right now. And they reference Texas Chainsaw Massacre a bunch of times. There's a character named Chainsaw and these two guys who are obsessed with the movie. And I knew all those references, and I was very proud to tell all my other 10, 11-year-old friends, I know what they're talking about. I had a very permissive aunt. She just said, I'm taking you to rent a movie, get whatever you want.
Hell yeah.
And we got Texas Chainsaw Massacre and blew our minds. It was the first time seeing an unedited horror movie from start to finish, and I thought it was great. And I was off to the races after that.
Talk about getting thrown in on the deep end. That's a serious one to start with.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you know, really kind of perked up when they would start to show Friday the 13th. A lot on cable and, you know, just trying to catch whatever I could after that.
It is always funny when you sort of start with such an intense movie and then you're like, this must be what they're all like. Because I remember one of my first horror movies being The Descent, which is a very, very scary movie.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I was right. Everything I thought about horror movies was correct. And this is just what they're like. And yeah, Texas Chainsaw, you know, it's so visceral in a way that is more emotion evoking than just like, here's some fucked up shit on screen, although it certainly has that in spades as well.
Sure. But the comedy aspect was huge for me too at that age. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of funny things that happen on purpose and inadvertently. You know, when you're a kid, you're looking at it and all the sort of cartoony aspects of it jumped out at me.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And a lot of that persisted in the 80s. So to me, yeah, like you're saying, I was like, oh, they're all like this. This is great, you know.
Do you have a favorite subgenre? I mean, it sounds like you definitely lean towards slashers. Is that just where it started, or is that persisting as one of your faves?
Yeah, slashers is my top. I love it when there's a group of people and they're picking them off one by one. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah.
And I love
it's
The
classic,
Descent.
it's simple.
Yeah, I can take that kind of in any atmosphere. But yeah, the slasher, I love a mass killer or, you know, crazy guy.
Hell yeah, I love it as well. And the movie we're talking about today is a very interesting example of a slasher, another fun splashy pick. It's a favorite of mine as well, even prior to the pick. And a particularly fun one to have towards the end of the show, because the star of this movie was on the show very early. We're talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Hell yeah. Quickly, I did listen to her episode, and I thought it was great, and I wanted to just sing my praises for that episode for a minute.
Oh, well, I definitely appreciate it. I did not go back and listen because that was in the before times for audio quality. So Caroline was so great. And you know, I think that when you watch these kind of movies, you're like, oh, everyone's so mean to each other. And then in this, she is Stretch. The character of Stretch is so sweet. And I think that a lot of that does come through from Caroline herself, who was really just a delight to talk to.
Yeah, she was great. And it was really cool to hear, you know, how much she knew about movies and that she really studied that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that she didn't kind of poo-poo away her start in horror movies, which I think, you know, some people do.
Yeah.
And that she wasn't like a victim of, you know, the 80s in general and became a person like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really fascinating that in the final commentary of the 4 commentaries that I watched, it was Tom Savini, Bill Moseley, and Caroline Williams. And she kept trying to, like, say smart, informed things about what was happening on the screen. And Bill Moseley is just so chaotic that he would constantly be throwing a wrench in her plans to talk. And it was a very funny dynamic, but she was certainly making clear how smart she was without actually being able to get much of the information out.
Well, that doesn't surprise me too much, but it does sound like fun.
Yeah. So Texas Chainsaw 2 is the final picture in a 3-picture deal that Tobe Hooper signed with Cannon Films in 1983. You have Life Force, Invaders from Mars, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. All 3 of these are essentially commercial failures. They would lead to director jail. Toby's sentenced to hard TV labor in Cable Land Penitentiary. But at the time, Cannon was so excited to get a sequel to Chainsaw that they didn't even let him finish the pitch, they said. It did become a bit of an issue when they were disappointed by the open comedy elements, but it's not just any IP either, you know, it's described as the easy rider of horror. Shattered the mold, proved horror movies could make money on a budget. It's no surprise that Cannon got stars in their eyes on this.
Sure. And have you seen the other 2 that he did for Cannon?
I have seen Life Force. I have not seen Invaders from Mars.
Okay, same. Life Force, I mean, I know that it has its reputation. To me, it was just, it was kind of a slog.
It's fine. It's totally fine. I certainly think that it's taking some swings that a lot of movies wouldn't. I think Toby's doing a lot of interesting artistic stuff. I see his thumbprint on it. But as far as just like an enjoyable movie for me to watch, maybe I'm not reaching for it every single time.
Yeah, and so I guess I'm surprised to hear that they're disappointed in the overt comedy elements in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 because, I mean, it does seem like there's a bit of outrageousness in Life Force. I don't know. Maybe you weren't supposed to laugh at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's funny, too, because especially at the time, young Dennis is ahead of the curve because a lot of people didn't see that the original had comedy elements in it. Toby was pissed that a lot of people didn't get this. I do see it as well. You know, I rewatched it. There's a lot of funny stuff with Franklin falling down the hill. There's a funny moment where he's like wondering if he said something to piss off the hitchhiker, and that's when he started going nuts. And then my favorite moment is when it's like after the 3rd teenager has basically like killed themselves on this estate. And Leatherface just like sits down and he's like, where the fuck are these guys coming from? Like they're just coming out of the damn woodwork here. It's good and it is funny, but not everyone got it.
That's a shame.
It is a shame. It certainly is. But in an attempt to do something different, Toby got his, if not active buddy, then like warm acquaintance, LM Kit Carson, to help with the script for Chainsaw 2. Kit said after Paris, Texas, which he also wrote, his agent said, "You made it," and Kit looked at the people around him and the work they were doing and said, "I better unmake it ASAP."
Yeah, do you believe this? Because this kind of points back to what I was saying about Catherine. He is, first of all, let's say what his name is. LM Kit Carson. This is the number 1 red flag for me. I can't trust a guy who uses initials for a first name, okay?
No,
and now maybe this is just a personal thing, and I don't want to explain why that is, but that's my opinion. Number 2, they said, "Oh, Kit, OLM, you made this great movie." And then he's like, "Oh, boy, what do I got to get away from all this fame and attention?" I don't know if I believe that. You know, you always meet these kind of guys who do these creative pursuits and then like they show it to you or they play you their song and they're like, I know it kind of sucks. Like, stand up for your stuff, man. Like, you know what I mean?
Sure. I do feel you. And I think that this is definitely something to be proud of. But it is funny just for him to, because Paris, Texas is so different from this movie in every way. And it's an interesting portrait of Texas, but like the stoic side of it. And this is the like manic, crazy capitalist side of it. Yeah. So definitely some funny stuff, but they did swing for the comedy fences, not only putting bold-faced jokes in, but also satirizing sequels, America and Reaganomics, and 80s horror in general. And it's funny that the version we got is the highly ratcheted back version. There was way more social commentary in the original script.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't aware of that, fact, but the whole taking all the tropes and, ranking up, ratcheting them up to 11 as fast as they could was super obvious on this more recent watch. When I first saw this movie, I was probably only like 13. And so, here I was, a dentist, was going along watching these movies. Mostly we're on cable, so a lot of the blood and gore has been edited out. And even in Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 1, it's really just blood that you see. And so this had so much, more going for it as far as, gore and this kind of crazy violence. And then the overt sexuality. It really freaked me out. And, it's one of the reasons why I picked this, because it did scare me off of horror movies, for about a year. I mean, I got right back into it. But yeah, I mean, there was just so many elements in it that I had never seen before in all these other 80s movies and not in the first. And it went over the top with it. And it was too much for my little brain to take at that time.
Yeah, you talk about the emphasis on the gore effects for Chainsaw 2. It's done by the masterful Tom Savini, who famously was a photographer in Vietnam, makes his work very, very accurate anatomically. It's extremely visceral, especially when you look at the preceding years, including Texas Chainsaw Prime. A lot of the horror movies had their violence happening off screen. Right. You definitely saw blood. You might see the aftermath sometimes, but you never saw something like Chop Top just going to fucking town with a hammer over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, Savini is the man. Nobody does it better. And
for sure.
We can, address his, work as we talk about the movie. But yeah, I do want to definitely say from the top that everything that I've seen of him, and I know we're both big Romero guys, and Day and Dawn. I mean, there's nothing like that. You just don't, it's sad that you don't see it anymore. And hopefully, fingers crossed, something will happen and we'll start to get those kind of movies again.
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. And yeah, so this movie is deliberately shocking two groups of people. Those who wanted a repeat of the first, being shocked by the comedy, and those who saw the very limited marketing, like the great poster parodying Breakfast Club. They're kind of being promised a movie that we don't get either. It's certainly funny, but it's comedy that sort of pushes beyond black humor, what Mick Garris called red humor. And on top of that, both of these groups aren't necessarily expecting the visceral viscera. People who are like, oh, I love Chainsaw, it's kind of lets your imagination do the heavy lifting. Oh, I'm looking for a comedy. I can't wait to go see this horror comedy. For that to be so intermingled with the violence, the divisiveness, it's that it's not scary and then funny, as like a catharsis pressure valve. It's scary and funny in the same moments. When Lou Perryman hawks up a loogie in the middle of being murdered. Yeah. Like, that is such a bizarre, surreal juxtaposition to hold in your sort of emotional well-being while you're watching this movie, that it knocks you off balance and it makes you feel weird and uncomfortable.
And it never lets up. Everybody is in such a frenzy, almost from the very beginning, that like you're saying, there is no release of pressure. They never take their foot off the gas. You have to, contend with things just getting worse continually until the movie ends.
Yeah. So Cannon started promoting and contracting screenings on the August 22nd, 1986 release date before they even had a first draft, which really puts Toby on the clock here. Hooper was actually originally only going to produce this, but then stepped in to direct after the schedule and budget became so tight that they just couldn't find anyone else to take on the job.
Yeah, I'd be curious. He said he had reached out to other genre directors, is the term that he used, and of course he didn't say any names, so I'd be very curious.
Yeah, around that time, you could get some really interesting picks, kind of some interesting what-ifs, but this means that he has to step away from Invaders of Mars, pass it on to his editor to finish in order to start pre-production on this. It is interesting to be like, well, Toby, he's talked at length about really liking to take his time in the editing room. He said that Texas Chainsaw Prime was sort of built in the editing room. There's a lot of weird juxtaposition, close-ups. And so for him to not be able to spend that time on Invaders of Mars does sort of make you wonder, like, oh, if he had been able to put that together a little more cohesively, could it have saved it a little bit? The fact that this is on such a time crunch means he didn't get to do the editing really extensively on this movie. I would say that if there's going to be any flaws in the movie, I would say maybe some of the editing is a little straightforward compared to what we've seen him do in other movies. It's just interesting to see like how that time crunch impacted the movies, and not just this movie, but also other movies.
Sure. And, a lot of the post-production material that I looked at talks about, the shortened amount of time and the budget cuts that they would make. But I don't see it in the finished product. I mean, it works out so great. I mean, I have no complaints. And when they needed to make something that was going to count, especially, whatever was going to be on the screen, it's there. The underground
the money
layer.
Is on screen, for sure.
I mean, it's perfect.
So they take their still developing script and they start shooting in May with a $5 million budget, wrapped on the 4th of July with a 24-hour consecutive shooting day, in theaters 7 weeks later. So funny, Kit talked about it and then showed a final revised draft dated June 28th. So truly, up until a week before the shoot wrapped, they were writing this thing. And obviously that timing is insanely quick. And while $5 million might seem like a lot at the time, especially since horror and Texas Chainsaw Massacre specifically is so entrenched in indie production, but in the 80s with stuff like Poltergeist, Toby was used to more, and a lot of it did go into the production design of the lair. It's built into this huge newspaper printing facility for the Statesman. They had to spend a fortune getting it ready. Apparently, they also spent a fortune on Dr. Pepper for Toby. They joked about having someone keep a full-time job, keeping one at the ready for him. I think it was a joke. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
And casting was difficult because of the demands of the shoot and the budget. They only offered Gunnar Hansen, the original Leatherface, scale to return, and he said, fuck off, basically.
Right.
Which, understandable. It's certainly a very challenging shoot, and he already had a miserable time on the first one. So Bill Johnson takes over. Really interesting shift in the characterization from the first to the second, changing from this sort of faceless, animalistic child to a horny little teenager.
Right.
It's a really big change. When people are like, oh, I like the original, I certainly get that, but I like having a little bit of depth to the character. I think you get the shock of his first appearance, but that can't really be repeated. He cannot be that same shocking animalistic person because we've seen him in a movie already. So I think that this is really their only option, is to sort of explore him a little more. Right.
I mean, if you can't tell that this is going to be a different movie, right off the bat than the first one, then, you deserve whatever you get. I mean, if you're surprised by it being a different Leatherface, then, I'm sorry for you, but that's on you.
Fuck off.
Hooper said that he wanted him to be more expressive, that he wanted the audience to know that Leatherface was like aware basically of what was going on.
Yeah. Bill Johnson, quite the character in interviews as well. The most theater actor that ever theater acted. He told a crazy story about the pressure from Cannon. They had finished wrapping for the day, and a big limo rolls up, and an enormous suit gets out and says, "Get me a book. You guys are behind schedule." And he rips a bunch of pages out, says, "Now you're on schedule," and leaves.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a story from a theater guy, or that could be a thing that actually happened.
Who knows? Who knows, man? Who knows? Now, the one returning actor is Jim Sedow as the cook, Drayton Sawyer, leader of the Cannibal Clan. Really amazing actor. I think that it's a tough and underrepresented job, or like people don't talk about it enough to be like, he has to sort of anchor the movies because, you know, with how different Leatherface is, it might as well be a different character and it's not the same actor. So the characterization is so different. So to have it still feel like the same world, we really are kind of relying on Jim Sedow's character. And I think that he nails it and he's so funny. You know, there's lots of talk of this guy's dirty jokes in the supplementary material. And I definitely see him being that kind of wisecracking, you know, good old boy kind of guy.
Sure. And you know, every time I watch him, I think like, how much coaching did he need to do what he does? And from what I heard, it wasn't much. Like he really was he embodied that character. You know, that's not the kind of guy he was in real life. That's just how good of an actor he was.
That's right. And he and his family are facing off against Caroline Williams, a Texas actor found via cattle call, if you will, as Vanita Stretch Brock, and Dennis Hopper as Lefty Enright. Very big year for Hopper, fresh out of rehab. He gets an Oscar nom for Hoosiers. He's also in Blue Velvet this year. Reportedly not a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yeah, that shocks me. I mean, I can only attribute that to some sort of lingering fog from substance abuse.
I think that must be the case, and I think that it speaks really highly to his commitment and also ability that I don't think that ever comes across in the performance.
Yeah.
He never feels anything less than 100% committed, and I think that that's really important for making the movie work, because if he's just fucking sleepwalking or rolling his eyes through this performance, the whole thing falls apart around him.
Sure. And there's no indication of that in any of the interviews. They all had, everyone I saw in these interviews that I watched had praised him and talked about his, you know, ways of getting into character and things like that. And so I agree. Yeah. You don't see that on the screen. You don't see him acting like, you know, he doesn't care.
Yeah, he doesn't feel above it. He did turn 50 on set, cut the cake with a chainsaw. Really great picture of it in the behind-the-scenes documentary. They also, in the making-of documentary, Kit talked about a cut subplot where Lefty was actually Stretch's dad. For the best that this got cut, in my opinion.
I think that is a little bit too much. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Our other hero is Lou Perryman as LG, an assistant cameraman on the first movie, who graduated to co-star. Not too bad. I believe he also has a small role in Poltergeist. And it took 3 commentaries and many supplemental videos for me to hear that this guy got fucking murdered with an axe in 2009, which is crazy and tragic.
This is in real life?
Yes.
I was not aware of this.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. I feel like it should be being talked about all the time.
Oh, this is insane.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
For him to depict on screen this brutal murder and then face a brutal assault and death in real life is shocking.
Only in Texas.
Only in Texas. I actually don't know for sure that it was in Texas. So maybe also in LA. I don't know.
I mean, yeah. Rest in peace to him. He was great. He just seemed like one of those guys that he could have pretty much done anything. You know, again, I doubt he needed much prompting to be the character that he was. And
definitely him.
Yeah, what I saw of him in interviews, he's pretty much playing himself, just maybe a little bit heightened.
Exactly. You have Bill Moseley, who studied at Yale and was so affected by a screening of the original as part of a double bill with Enter the Dragon. Holy shit, what a fucking screening. That he made his own short film parody called The Texas Chainsaw Manicure.
Sure.
Which Hooper saw and was impressed by and invited him to take part in the sequel as Chop Top.
And did you see the head cheese part?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That's the only part I could find. But yeah,
that was the clip that I had seen circulating.
And have you ever tried head cheese?
No.
Well, it's not bad.
I'm not into liver because of the like iron bloody taste, and I fear that it would taste like that. Although I guess I have had pig brain on a cracker.
Okay.
From I went to a Cuban friend of mine in high school when he graduated. His family threw a pig roast, and so I had pig brain and pig tongue that day, and both were very, very good actually.
I mean, that's most of the head, so honestly, you could just say that you have had it
there
at this point.
Go. All right. Yeah, actually, I have, Dennis.
Hey, all right. Well, moving on.
Yeah. The timing works out well for Chop Top to be absent from the first because he is a Vietnam veteran, twin brother to Nubbins, aka the hitchhiker from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1. But it's not just a reason for him to not have been in the first one. This will come up a lot as we discuss, but it's one of the many examples where Toby depicts the leveraging of America's violent history to at least wring some money out of it.
I was really shocked to find out that Nubbins was like the normal one.
Yeah, man. Who saw that coming? Chop Top wants to open Nomland and is himself in a highly commoditized version of the stereotypical veteran's outfit with plenty of buttons needing to be purchased for that vet. The pace of Hollywood putting out what could be considered exploitative movies about Vietnam is picking up with Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Hamburger Hill, and Good Morning Vietnam, Born on the 4th of July in the years following this. So, there are some Vietnam movies before this, but pretty prescient to have him be like, oh, it's gross that they're commoditizing this.
And even in your TV shows and your lesser movies, there was always just like one character. You know what I mean? There was a guy who was a vet and he was affected in some fashion. Right. And it just persisted, into the early 90s. It was, I don't know. It really, like by the 90s, I'm really aware, like this is still a thing. You know what I mean? Like, and it has been for so long.
Sure,
and I know that's because of the people
lingers on it for so long
who were creating the content, but it's crazy and we don't do it anymore. And I mean, by those standards, every TV show and movie and commercial would have like one person who served in Afghanistan at least.
Yeah, and they talked about it. But his makeup took between 3 and 4 hours. They convinced him with 5,000 smackaroos to shave his head to save an hour in the chair each time, which made me laugh.
That sounds like he probably, I think he got one over on them. I mean, he seems like the kind of guy that would pretty much do whatever anyway. So I think he just on a whim was like, pay me. And they were like, oh, let's pay him.
Hey, I get it. If I'm the makeup crew and I'm trying to deal with all this shit, I'm saving that hour for $5,000. A one-time payment, that's easy money. I do want to shout out the score as well. I heard a lot of people talking negatively about it. I like it. It's composed by Tobe Hooper himself and Jerry Lambert. There's a lot of psycho elements to it. It feels a lot like a Hitchcock movie. There's also a visual sort of homage to Hitchcock when Stretch is driving in the car, and there's like a interesting sort of rear projection looking moment. I think that there is some very cool homages to where horror came from in addition to satirizing what is currently going on.
Yeah, I mean, I focus a little bit more on the pop songs that were in it.
Sure.
But I think
the soundtrack itself for sure amazing.
But I honestly, that kind of speaks to the quality of the score when it's not, invasive.
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned, incredible effects done by the master, Tom Savini, and his team. We will talk about the specifics as they come up, but we got to just say wowza as many times as possible.
Yeah, wowza.
That's right. And once the movie finished, they received an X rating, and they said, well, we got to just go unrated rather than resubmit, possibly multiple times. Again, I had to sort of listen to a couple sources to find this quote, but eventually Toby was pretty blunt about it and said they told him the only way he could satisfy them with this movie was by putting it in a can and putting that can in a closet. Maybe he could get away with the title sequence.
I mean, it makes sense. It's not shocking that it was unrated. It does make me wonder, and I wish my memory was as good as when I saw part one. I don't know what adult would have rented this for me and my brother and, friends, but somebody did.
Hell yeah. The movie did still see some cuts. There was a much higher body count originally, including a bunch of football fans and even Joe Bob Briggs, but this was removed for quote-unquote pacing, although rumors abound that the Cannon Group insisted the movie come in under 100 minutes so they could get one more showtime in per day.
A big guy in a limo pulled up and...
Yeah, exactly.
He was like, you got one more minute. And his watch says 99.
It's also really interesting that because of this, it skews the typical ratio of innocents to villains' death. It's like about even now with like 4 innocents and 4 villains, which is kind of interesting. I don't know. It's atypical.
I didn't really pick up on that, but one thing I did pick up on was just that it is a more sort of contained story than most of the slashers that I like to watch, which is, like 6 or 7 people go somewhere and then, they all have their little tableaus.
Yeah, yeah. We also haven't checked in with the villainous Roger Ebert in a while.
I read about this too. Go ahead.
He was very much not into the movie and its comedy, saying, quote, "The first Chainsaw was gruesome and depraved, yes, but it also had an undeniable artistry, and it truly was frightening. Part 2 has a smirk on its face, and would rather giggle than scream. I thought perhaps Tobe Hooper would make a horror movie that would define in some sort of crazy way how nauseating a movie could possibly be. That wouldn't necessarily be praiseworthy, but in its own way, it would have marked some kind of milestone now that the bloody special effects have turned horror movies into studies in clinical pathology." So, definitely not a fan.
Shocking.
1 star, says the villain. How dare you do this?
Ebert never lets us down.
That's right. It did make $8 million at the box office and went double platinum on VHS, so it did wind up probably profitable, we can safely say. And I think it winds up as the second highest grossing canon movie after Runaway Train, once you take the VHS sales into account. But certainly not the box office boom that you might expect from a legacy sequel like this. So they were disappointed in how it performed. But best horror movie ever made, so, it just needed to find its audience.
Yeah.
So let's get into the actual movie. I loved during one of the commentaries, a film critic, it was just him talking by himself. He said, "The movie begins as all movies should, with the Canon Films logo." It is a beautiful one. I do love to see it. You're in for some real shit there. And it starts not with John LaRoquette, but still a very nice speech at the beginning, a crawl that says, "On the afternoon of August 18th, 1973, 5 young people in a Volkswagen van ran out of gas on a farm road in South Texas. 4 of them were never seen again. The next morning, the one survivor, Sally Hardesty Enright, was picked up on a roadside, blood-caked and screaming bloody murder. Sally said she had broken out of a window in hell. The girl babbled a mad tale, a cannibal family in an isolated farmhouse, chainsawed fingers and bones, her brother, her friends hacked up for barbecue, chairs made of human skeletons. Then she sank into catatonia." Texas lawmen. Oh, that's only halfway, bro. It's so fucking long.
Yeah, go ahead.
"Texas lawmen mounted a month-long manhunt but could not locate the macabre farmhouse. They could find no killers and no victims. No facts, no crime. Officially on the records, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre never happened."
Oh, yeah, there it is.
There it is, yeah. "But during the last 13 years, over and over again, reports of bizarre grisly chainsaw mass murders have persisted all across the state of Texas. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre has not stopped. It haunts Texas. It seems to have no end." Finally, Finn.
Chilling. There's my joke. John LaRoquette reportedly wanted 2 bags of weed for this one, and they found a guy who would do it for a couple of joints.
That's right. The budget was not what they wanted on this one.
That limo guy, he just rolled the window down and he held out 2 fingers.
He held out a bag of nugs, reached in, smoked them himself.
Yeah.
But it is a fun intro. It's a little more dramatic than the first one, but again, it sort of fits into the new tone of this one. I think it definitely works.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not trying to do the thing, which really blew my mind, the first time I saw part 1 where they say, this is a true story, this is based on a true story, which if you're a dumb kid, you're like, whoa, what,
How'd they get the footage?
But then this is like, oh, hey, this is insane and it's still happening and cops don't know what to do.
They're covering it up. Yeah, it's great. So it starts with 2 young men, Buzz and Rick the Prick, speeding along to the Texas-Oklahoma game tailgate. Their names are very appropriate, as Rick is wearing crazy lenticular glasses and leaning out of the window taking pot shots at signs, classic prick behavior, while Buzz gets buzzed, drinking a shiner and screaming hook 'em horns, just in case we weren't sure of the setting.
Right.
So, certainly appropriate names, but these guys also represent an emotional motif of the movie regarding new money destroying Texas by families like the Sawyers clinging to the past. So, certainly they are emblematic of the yuppie at large.
They don't waste any time. They've moved on from hippies, and they've gone right to the type of person that you want to see get killed immediately.
That's right. And the interesting part is that as true blue capitalists, the Sawyers are still willing to take advantage of these interlopers and literally grind up yuppies to sell them to the rest. Award-winning prime meat, as they're referred to. Now, Buzz and Rick call into the K-Okla radio request line, home of DJ Stretch, who's very upset at these fellas tying up the line being dickheads and cackling with laughter while playing chicken with a truck. And our engineer LG can't sever the connection, so when the truck tracks these fools down and confronts them on the bridge, they're hearing it all. Really funny in the commentary that it was referred to as the bridge that goes on forever, something I did not notice while I was watching on my own, but now I go, oh wow, yeah, they are on that bridge for a really long time. But quite the confrontation it is. The truck is keeping pace in reverse, while out pops Nubbins, who dances on the roof. No One Lives Forever playing from the radio, classic Oingo Boingo. Really, really fun scene to start us off with.
So he yells, one of them yells, who is some kind of geek? He calls him some kind of geek.
Yeah, that's right.
I thought it was pretty funny.
That's right.
I didn't know, I didn't really pick up the first time I saw this that it was Nubbins. You just could tell it was a corpse being manipulated. And it's absolutely horrifying. If I was young Buzz or Rick the Prick, I certainly would have mimicked their reactions.
That's right. And it's not even just Nubbins. He's being Weekend at Bernie'd by Leatherface, who attacks with the famous saw. We should have known from his taste for boogieing down that it was him.
Yeah.
And as the mummified corpse of the hitchhiker from the first movie, Nubbins is another instance of the Sawyers refusing to let go of the past. So again, really nailing this very early on.
And then we get a great Tom Savini effect.
Ooh, mamma mia. He chops Buzz's head right in half. Hilariously over-the-top effect as Buzz reaches up in surprise, despite having half a head. Apparently it was even more. There was like a balloon. You saw the skull lifting off and like half brains spilling out.
Such a cool way that he made that effect. When you see him from the front, he puts his hands up by his head, and it's starting to separate. Your mind, I think, kind of fills it in, and even though you do, or maybe that's from it's lifting. It does look like it's part of a big chunk of his head is sliding off, is about to slide off.
Absolutely, it does. And the boys go off the bridge as the line cuts off with Stretch and LG both stunned.
Absolutely insane. But, yeah, a great way to start.
Great opening, no doubt. Now, former Texas Ranger Lieutenant Enright surveils the crime scene in the light of day. This is Lefty, clocking the deep chainsaw scars in the wreckage. And the local police are pissed that he's intruding on their turf, but his niece and nephew are Sally and Franklin Hardesty, two victims of the Chainsaw family in South Texas 14 years ago. So he's chasing them here to the north of the state. I also forgot to mention, can't believe I forgot to mention at the beginning, in between having started the show and talked to Caroline Williams, and now I have visited the Texas Chainsaw House, which was cool.
Okay.
I don't think I had been there, right? I don't think I mentioned that in the first episode, did I?
I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah, so that's cool, right? I went to the fucking Chainsaw House. It was cool. And what's really fun is that it is a restaurant now. So it's not just like, oh, I'm looking at it from the outside. You're free to like go inside and wander around. They have like a doll of Grandpa up in the attic that you're allowed to go fucking say what's up to. And it is cool because you walk in and it still, the architecture, the framework still very much looks like the movie. So you walk in and you go like, wow, that is the doorway. Like suddenly I am feeling a little chilled to like, he might be around that corner. And I think that is such an effective sense of place that these movies really establish, and that a lot of movies forego to their detriment. So that's something that these two do really incredibly well.
And it's Austin?
So I actually, when I was traveling down to Austin, I landed in Dallas and drove. And so it was like on the way, I sort of dipped out. It's like another like 2-hour detour basically out a little further, but it's like in between those two cities.
Wow, very cool.
It was cool. And I got a pretty decent chicken fried steak and a Shiner.
Oh, as far as you know.
As far as I know. That's exactly right. But I also do want to shout out Hopper. He's so good, so quick. I love this, like, try to speak plain, saves time, he tells the cop. And the cop retorts, I have authority from the DA's office to put you back on the next flight to Amarillo. And Hopper gets this twinkle in his eye. And he says, will you just do that, son? I'd like to see that authority.
They make him look so cool. They know like that he's a commodity,
Yep.
you know, and that moviegoers know who he is, and that he can kind of play this crazy guy, you know what I mean? People are aware of his reputation, and yeah, they make him look like such a badass,
Absolutely.
even though he's driving that dorky ass station wagon.
It's discreet. It's discreet. So the story hits the paper in a search for witnesses, though the police make him look like a loon, and he goes on a bender in despair. This means when Stretch arrives to his motel, fighting through the drunk football fans, including Toby Hooper himself with a cameo in the Vikings horn helmet, in an effort to talk to Lefty, he's in a real bad spot. He's spiraling from the isolation and letting that drive him to this drink. She says regulations demand that they record all the calls in, so she has a tape of the attack, and this is her chance to stop playing headbanging music and do something real. And this is where something very, very interesting happens, in that he declines her assistance. He says that he doesn't need anyone to stand with him, and in fact, she's going to get in the way. And this is sort of the first example of a motif that is talked about a little bit less in this movie, I think, which is the way that toxic masculinity really shapes the world and how women have to navigate it. He is not a good dude, really. Like, he's certainly a very charismatic and personable protagonist to watch in this movie. But when you think about the things that he does, Stretch's real name is Vanita, which is a Sanskrit word for woman. And while it's expected that the villains are bad examples of masculinity, it's less common for the hero to also be this. And not to get too far ahead, but in addition to his bad attitude about Stretch, he also uses her and lets her down time and time again. He's constantly late. He puts her in danger. There are things that are not heroic acts and really shape the path of Stretch.
That's a great point, and I do feel like you get to see Stretch recognize that and deal with it in a way that she knows how to deal with that kind of character. That
Right.
It shows that Stretch knows what she's dealing with and can handle it.
Right. Meanwhile, his declaration as he sends her away reinforces his spiral. He says, "I got a perfect willingness to die. That gives me a moral on these mad dogs. They live on fear. They thrive on it. I ain't got no fear left." Great line. Also a very funny moment when Stretch returns to LG at the chili cook-off that they're reporting from, grumbling and muttering hard ass, and he hears her and says, pained, "Maybe a semi-hard ass, but I got a soft heart. Look, I built your fry house."
That was cool. I mean, that's an impressive fry house.
Yeah.
And it was LG's way of showing his unrequited affection for Stretch. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out how much I thought that the cook looks like Rodney Dangerfield in Caddyshack, you know, when he goes to get his trophy.
The meat starts spilling onto his pocket there, and you just go, "You look like a fucking slob now." Yeah, he's doing that big time. But it is time for them to pay attention, because Drayton Sawyer is announced as the winner of the chili cook-off for the second year in a row. No secret to his success. It's the meat. Don't skimp. Meanwhile, the hostess is pulling a tooth from the chili out of her mouth. One of the hard shell peppercorns, he says, grabbing it from her.
Yeah. Is that a thing? Is that a real thing?
I don't know, man. I don't know, but I think you can tell it's a tooth.
He grabs it quick, and then he makes up the term hard shell peppercorn.
It's also so funny to me that he does have a shitload of chili pouring down his suit jacket from the trophy. There's a definite irony to their clawing up the small business ladder of success after they were initially marginalized by the march of automation and capitalist efficiencies. They're now beating them at their own game, literally, with the chili cook-off.
I never thought about that. I mean, so they start off as just like regular, like slaughterhouse workers.
Right.
And now they've moved on to restaurateurs.
That's right. That's right. Because
Farm to
Grandpa
table.
lost his job, right? He went crazy because of automation, got left behind. And now they said, fuck it, we'll pull ourselves up by our human leather bootstraps. Lieutenant Enright, meanwhile, goes chainsaw shopping. Wild, wild scene. Kind of hard to describe.
It's so great. Wait, no, okay. I have a theory. Okay. So he goes to the store. Now, here's my theory. The guy in the store. Now, okay, do you want to give any description of what happens
Sure. So he's like silently weighing the chainsaws. He tests how one might use them as a weapon, walks outside with 3 of them, 1 huge one and 2 mini ones, and then goes to town on a log outside. The owner is loving it.
He says, hit them suckers a time or two, which I thought was hilarious.
Hell yeah.
And so the salesman just starts having the time of his life.
He's dancing on the fucking porch.
And then I had a revelation. This guy, this chainsaw store owner, is a Sawyer, but he's disavowed that cannibal life, and he's gone straight, and he's opened up a chainsaw store. And now for the first time in forever, he's seen somebody go nuts with a chainsaw, and he's like, you know what? I just think that's so fun. We used to kill people with chainsaws all the time, and it was so fun. And I haven't seen anything like that in forever.
Wow, that really works for me, especially because, there's a lot of sexual elements where Bubba is using the chainsaw as a phallus. And, this man clearly says, oh, my aching banana. He is sexually frustrated as well, and clearly views both the log and the chainsaws as a penis, just like Bubba did. This theory holds a lot of water.
They're freaks, man.
Lefty goes to visit Stretch. He admits that he needs her help, and he asks her to play the tape on the air. They're here, he says, and maybe this will get the authorities to actually help me out. And her way to get around any rules is to label it as a request from Lefty. Very funny when she's like, hey, people complain about the requests every fucking night, dude.
Yeah, I had really missed that element. I watched it several times over the last 5 years, but before that I had only watched it, maybe 2 or 3 times. And I never really caught that until on my more recent watches that it was a request, and that's why she was playing it on the radio. In my head, I had just remembered that she was playing it to draw attention to it, but I didn't know why. So I thought that was really interesting that was how they justified it was, hey, we got another request for this cool new sound that's popping off.
Yeah. Oh, it's like noise music before that. They're putting K-Okla on the map. But the Sawyers do hear their attack on the radio and they panic. And when LG leaves Stretch to go get some coffee, they make their move and she finds Chop Top sitting in the lobby. I want to buy some radio ad time, he says.
Terrifying.
I love this moment so much. First of all, the fact that you hear him before you see him is very scary. Second of all, the light is very surreal in this moment. And it stays very elevated for the rest of the movie. It's a huge shift from what we've seen so far. And it really feels like this encounter with Chop Top is like Alice falling into Wonderland. This is her touching another reality by playing that tape and getting herself involved.
Yeah, definitely. I hadn't thought about it like that, but I mean, it just opens up a door to a hell world,
Yeah, absolutely.
He's so frightening. He's just so gruesome looking. He's pale as a ghost. Ugh. He has that horrendous wig on.
My Sonny Bono wig do.
It's just all of it it's terrifying.
Yeah, this guy is constantly picking at the area where his scalp meets a metal plate in his head and eating the little bits of skin. And we know that he's a cannibal, but somehow this is still the most horrible example.
How do you even think of that? How do you even come up with that? It's hard to pick up on what he's doing on your first watch, maybe even your second, or the first time you see him doing it. Obviously, as he does it more throughout the movie, you realize what he's doing. But when you first see him do it, you're like, what the hell is he even thinking? He has to heat the coat hanger up and then scrape it on his head.
Ugh.
What draws you? Did you try a fork? Did you try?
He's got to have that hook, dude, because you can let gravity do some of the work. Very funny, but also interesting element for Toby and Bill to separately discuss this. So I believe that it was real and in the script, or at least discussed about, that this is also a sexual thing for Chop Top.
Right. He's poking himself in the brain in a manner that gives him sexual gratification.
That's right. They described it as essentially a sex toy. But again, tying back into that toxic masculinity on display, it's not just Bubba. Both of these sexually frustrated brothers have found negative outlets to satisfy those needs. That they are both self-harming, that they are both taking it out on other people. It's really disturbing in a way that kind of speaks to the modern plague of young men who are sexually frustrated and unable to place that anger appropriately.
Yeah. These guys, they need a fucking hot coat hanger to the head. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you ain't wrong, bro. You ain't fucking wrong.
That'll cure your incel.
In his rambling, Chop Top says, I know what you're thinking. This is weird. Hoping I can handle it. And that moment of lucidity is honestly the most terrifying line to me.
Did he have any scripted lines?
This was the fucking crazy thing, was that Tom Savini kept asking, like, was this written? Did you make that up? Did you make that up? And they kept saying, no, everything was in the script. That a lot of this was just Kit Carson really fucking being on stage, like on the set. He was helping to write things every day. Yeah, everything on the page. So very, very.
Well, thank you for not referring to him as LM, because I don't think I could contain my anger after just hearing that over and over again.
I would never do that, and you can take that to the bank.
All right.
Now, he refuses to leave, and I love they're just repeating goodnight to each other. It is so bizarre and uncomfortable and funny. Again, one of those moments where you have to really like balance being scared and laughing at the same time. And he says he loved the Lefty Request record. Are you going to play it again? Maybe I could get a copy.
You know you're supposed to kind of laugh at this guy, but also he's the scariest guy around.
For sure.
He's so gross.
For sure. And as he leads her to the record vault, Leatherface bursts out and, swinging wildly, actually clips his brother's dome, destroying his wig and sending sparks flying from the plate. Non-flashback. Yeah,
so this is the first, when I first saw this movie, it was the first time I became aware of like a metal plate in someone's head. I didn't have any understanding for that. I had to have that explained to me. And I mean, it still looks just absolutely insane. He's scraped away a ton of the skin from around it. So you know that he's been at it with this coat hanger business for a long time now.
Bro, that was the thing that fucking shook me in the most recent commentary. They talked about, like, the implication is that it was once completely buried beneath skin. Yeah. Like, when he got the surgery, he probably looked pretty normal, but then by picking at it, he has removed all of that flesh to expose the plate. Like, that's his own doing. It's really upsetting to consider.
I do, however, think it's great that he tries to salvage his wig and that he then sort of wears it as an ascot.
Yeah, I do love that. He's great. Stretch flees and Dog Will Hunt. Leatherface pursues, but he can't get through the metal door, and he's immensely frustrated. Stretch tries to calm herself, repeating what Lefty said about how they live on fear. And LG returns with coffee, spitting on the truck because he thinks it's Lefty, the man competing for her attention, which is a very funny moment. But he enters and finds Chop Top making a mess in the vault. Lick my plate, dog dick!
Yeah, one of the all-time classics.
Leatherface bursts in from the hallway. The distraction gives Chop Top the in to start hammering LG in the head. It's so brutal, and it's really reminiscent of the first one as he, like, seizes up and shakes from the blunt trauma. And it just keeps cutting back to it.
Just like everything, from 1 to 2, they ramp it up so high. In 1, it's just one swift hit, and then he pulls the guy behind the door. And in this, you just have to sit with it and watch him, his legs twitch around insanely, and he just hammers away on his head. It's brutal.
It really is. Meanwhile, in the behind-the-scenes documentary, Bill tells a story about how Toby has him do this scene a dozen or so times, and eventually he's like, am I doing something wrong here? And Toby just goes, hell no, Bill, just having fun watching.
I mean, in the part 1, that is surprising, but it is kind of humorous because he just pops out and grabs the guy and then goes away. Right. And it's like, what just happened, kind of? But in this one, it is just there's no question. Yeah, you are made to look at it and you know exactly what's happening. There's so much blood and it looks so painful.
Yep. Reinvigorated, Leatherface returns to Stretch and realizes he can enter from the wall on the other side, cornering her. But old Chrome Dome back there mentioned that Stretch is their favorite DJ and they listen every night, so he's a bit conflicted. It's really funny that you can hear Chop Top outside screaming, "Get that bitch, Leatherface!" Like, practically fully popping in with a pitchfork and horns on his shoulder. But he's a growing boy, and his hormones get the best of him, so he waggles the chainsaw at her between her legs, runs it up her thigh to her crotch, while licking his lips. It is disturbing.
It was terrible.
No doubt.
He bumps the end of the chainsaw, like, up against her crotch. There was no, like, doubt.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, I will refer back to the first time I saw this movie. I was a young guy, and I only had a sort of very clinical definition of what happens during sex. And this sort of, like, mixing it with this overt violence just tore my brain in half. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And even still, it's gross and disturbing. You know what I mean? Like, I think that the preceding scene sort of helps, you know, calm it down a little bit with the really overt comedy that happens.
Definitely. And she leans in to save her bacon, as it were, asking, "How good are you?" and being so sexy that it becomes overwhelming. He shudders and creams his damn Levi's.
I mean, how good are you? Like, that line is amazing. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And she says it in, I feel like there's like 3 different definitions for it in the way she says it. You know what I mean? And you can tell
Triple
that it
entendre. Those are rare.
that it's fucking with his head big time. You can tell.
Yeah.
And then, he obviously loses it. And then when he tries to start the chainsaw and it won't start, that is hilarious. I mean, that is just a hilarious gag, and it will never get old.
That's right. And when he does finally get it turned on again, rather than attack her, he just destroys the room and the radio equipment, even lying to Chop Top and nodding, yes, he got her.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of critics point to this as the scene that ruined it for them. Again, no doubt it is disturbing, but I do think that it is more about not having a stomach for disturbing content rather than it being bad. Because it's so effective that, like, it literally, this to me is like the epitome of the kind of scene that makes you want to, like, do the classic, like, finger, like, peeking through your fingers, where you're like, this is the classic attraction revulsion thing, right? It's like a primal reaction to it. And it's also very funny watching them get a bit bashful about it in the making of documentary. Although Bill Johnson talked about it from Bubba's perspective, it had been something of a marriage proposal, and she didn't say no, so he's all excited on the way out. And I like that one thing he said is that the Cannon goons were frequently pushing for more of the monster. Where's the monster, they'd say. And they meant Chop Top. Because there's a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on where Mosley is the monster and Johnson is the lover. Bubba is hard and leathery on the outside, but soft inside, while Chop Top's exterior is meant, in his eyes, to be deceptively inviting with this Vietnam veteran getup. But as we see from the plate, he's hard as steel inside.
Oh, that's insane. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I do see that. It's definitely not something that would have registered while I was watching it. But yeah, now that you explain it that way, it is fun to think of them as 2 sides of that coin.
Yeah.
And especially with, like you mentioned, you know, Chop Top is trying to influence him to do the worst things possible the entire time.
They drag LG out and head home, also taking his hat to add insult to injury, but he needs a new plate cover, so... Lefty is late, and she can't let these guys get away, so she bravely hops in her Jeep and follows them to Texas Battle Land. This is a very Hitchcock score again. Also, this is the moment where it's like kind of rear projection looking. I do want to talk about the theme park, but in a moment.
Right, but it was a great scene when she first pulls up to it. I mean, that was very cool.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I also want to talk about Stretch here being unwilling to not do the right thing. You know, she tracked down Lefty. She still worked with him after he was a dickhead. She won't let these guys get away. She survived. It would be so tempting to fuck off.
Right.
But she puts herself back at risk to help others by stopping them. And I think that this is part of what makes her such a great quote-unquote final girl, is that she really does have a deep empathy, a well of empathy that she's pulling from in order to drive her actions in a way that I think Ginny does as well in Friday the 13th Part 2. And that's why they're both top tier, in my opinion.
Does she think that LG is alive, or...
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I to me, it was just like she wanted to see where they were going and try and stop them.
Right
because to be able to report back to Lefty or something.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking as well, as now that she's basically in it with Lefty, but she has to keep the investigation going.
Exactly. And suddenly a car appears and chases her. Luckily, it is just Lefty, but she was standing on a trapdoor, which opens and she falls, clinging to a vine for dear life. Again, very much sort of like an Alice in Wonderland imagery as she's clinging to this rabbit hole here as Alice in her blue shirt.
Does he know that he's holding out a fucking skeleton arm?
Dude, it's so fucking funny. She says, "Where were you?" And he admits he used her as bait, but he's here now. And he reaches out saying to grab this and I'll pull you up. But it is a skeleton arm. So it is both extremely funny imagery as she literally clutches its hand like an actual person reaching out to help her, but also clearly insane and not weight supporting.
It's so funny.
So she plummets down the pit as the wrist ligament turns to dust immediately.
Yeah. If he would have just taken 2 seconds and just ripped a bone off, you know.
Right. No, he had to go for the look.
But he seems to do kind of like a double take at it after he picks it up and says, oh, goodness.
Grabbing his chainsaw as Lefty prays in preparation for battle and runs in, zero considering stealth. He's screaming and waving it, but there's nobody there. So he takes in his surroundings a bit, including a mural of Davy Crockett at the Alamo. Another sort of pure representation of the violent past again, now commoditized by this theme park, but it refuses to be completely sanitized, seeming to bleed on its own. So when Lefty kicks a hole in the wall, he discovers that it was barely holding back a mountain of viscera stacked up inside. So gross.
It's absolutely disgusting, and it is. If you haven't seen anything with like guts and gore, before, and the pile of stuff just rushes out of this hole,
Ugh.
I mean, it is shocking. I guess there are parts, that they don't use. I'm a little bit surprised to hear that. But, they've found a little place to dump them. And unfortunately for Lefty, he's busted a hole in it.
Yeah, no wonder Drayton's in the hole if he's throwing out all this meat here.
I would suspect that he doesn't know, and that he needs to, he obviously, his management skill is pretty laissez-faire. But, and that's probably why they're hidden in a wall, is because if he saw them throwing them away, he would freak out and kick him and scream at him.
Yeah, that makes sense. This individual moment and also the movie itself each sort of represent Texas, according to Toby, containing the opposing truths of peak America, but also their own country, basically. That they see themselves both of these things. That it is a state built on bloodthirsty capitalism and is the biggest consumers in the world, that they are placid human cattle to the sawyers as they stuff themselves with booze and the meat of their peers, just waiting to be taken advantage of. It's certainly a pretty grim outlook, but this then triggers Lefty, appropriately named, to scream, tear it all down in disgust at the devil's playground, sawing apart the support beams, very much representative of that outsider view that Hooper had of Reagan and what he and the Sawyers stood for, which is unbridled capitalism, quote-unquote family values, and a willingness to sacrifice your neighbor for your own gain.
And also, isn't it true that you were the valedictorian of your high school and your speech was basically mimicking Dennis Hopper's crazy rantings, shouting, tear it all down and send it back to hell?
I was the salutatorian, but everything else was correct.
Okay.
Now,
maybe next time.
Yeah, I'm planning on going back and taking another run at it. Once I tear it all down, that'll be allowed. You'll be able to go back. Meanwhile, Stretch finds herself in the meat locker. Looks great, this shot, with the lights sort of poking in through the holes. We're in the Sawyer compound for the rest of the movie, which is kind of a crazy thing.
Now, fans of Best Little Horror House will know how big of a skeleton guy George is.
That's right.
I know that you're huge on skeletons. So you had to love the smokehouse that was, did you notice it was all made out of bones and skulls?
Oh, yeah, dude. Everywhere you look, there's a skeleton. It's incredible. And it's so funny listening to them in the commentary be like, oh, we ordered all these cheap skeletons and we ordered like the cheapest ones. And we're like, oh, wow, these look incredibly real. And the guy was like, they are real. Like they just ordered them shipped over from India, basically.
Yeah, he said it was cheaper to do that than to buy a replica, which is insane.
That's right.
But yeah.
They did spend a fortune on this lair because we spent so much time in it. It does show. Unfortunately, this shack does get to 125 degrees as they're filming in June in Texas with a ton of lights. Bill Johnson said in an interview that they did a 50-mile radius loop for lamps from Goodwills, junkyards, etc., because rather than have to constantly worry about setting up lights, they decided to just make it so everywhere was lit no matter what.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool, and we'll talk later, I think, more about how they hid all that. It was very interesting.
Definitely. The heat also made a lot of the real bone sculptures that were less clean start to stink, so not the most fun thing to be around. Also, all that offal in the walls.
Oh, so you get what you pay for. I mean, you wanted a cheap, real skeleton, and I'm sorry, we accidentally left some meat on there.
The Slayers should be thrilled. Now, this upcoming moment is truly one of the most horrific moments that I've ever seen in a horror movie. It's so impactful.
Unlike anything.
I remember the first moment I saw it, it really like seared my brain. And every time I go back to it, I'm like, surely it will be less impactful this time. And it just gets worse because as you notice, like the little moments, like him sticking his finger in the hole and waggling it around.
Yeah.
Boy, it's just so awful and upsetting. But this, we see Leatherface using an electric knife to cut apart LG.
He cuts his pant. He cuts his jeans off with it.
That's right.
And it's still able to cut his skin.
It's a sharp-ass knife, bro.
I mean, what was the... I couldn't catch the brand name of it. You said you watched it in 4K, so if you caught that, let me know. But
I think it was just KitchenAid. They, you know, they make good ones.
And it's a pretty good, like, clean shave of the skin. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was an impressive knife.
They don't pay him the big bucks for nothing, that Leatherface. And he does take off his face for another mask, waggling his finger in the mouth hole and everything. Then, after some meat hooks drop to get his attention, Leatherface finds Stretch, and although he panics at first, in another effort to keep her hidden, drapes LG's face over hers.
Another insane line reading from her where she just shouts, "No good."
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing.
It is great. His own hand is so huge. As he touches her face and arranges her new look, he like plays with her like a doll and dances with her as she sobs. It's so upsetting. And in the thinking of this as a love story between Bubba and Stretch, it does also kind of take on this joy in us undertone. Like this is a continuation of the proposal. He has his leather face. Now this is hers as well.
Okay.
It is a little interesting there.
I was so kind of confused by that because I didn't understand if he had a point to the dancing and everything. I didn't understand what his goal was at that point. I mean, I think, I can kind of see what you're saying where he's, making her more like him or whatever. I don't know. But that whole scene, it was like, at first I thought, oh, he kind of has a point to what he's doing. But then it seemed like, no, he's just insane. You know what I mean?
He is insane and he loves her. And so he's trying to dance with her, I guess. Now,
do you think Stretch knew that was LG's face at that point?
No, I don't. I don't think she knows. I mean, she's just freaking out because no matter whose face it was, it's fucking gross.
Disgusting. Yeah, I mean, it's like the worst thing that could happen to you.
That's right.
Only second to being the guy who gets it shaved off of your head.
That's right. And when Lefty's work draws his attention, Leatherface ties her up and locks her in again. Again, very upsetting as she struggles to get free. The way that her hands are tied behind, and you see the real great physical acting as she tries to get the mask off and everything.
Yeah. Oh.
She realizes here that LG, and we also realize that LG is in fact not dead, but wakes screaming and flayed.
I mean, it's so perfect. It's again, absolutely terrifying, totally gross, and he plays it so perfectly. Just the pain and terror, and he doesn't even know half of what has happened to him yet.
Yeah. It's a real triumph for Tom here as he gets to do his version of Hellraiser, basically. Very funny story in the behind-the-scenes documentary about how they needed him to get ready for 8 a.m., so he went in at midnight, and they had him lay down to get the makeup put on all over, and he just slept through it, and he, quote, woke up looking like a freak.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's great. And I mean, why not?
Hell yeah. LG could maybe be considered the non-toxic male in Stretch's life if we want to assign that to somebody, although he is a little overly persistent at times in his affections, and, he does still want to help, so he grabs a knife, he cuts her free before collapsing and saying, "Guess I'm falling apart on you, honey."
He makes these insane stabbing motions with the knife. I thought that was so funny. Before finally he just very calmly cuts the...
It's so weird, and it almost kind of like mimics the grandpa movements. It's really strange.
I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, he lays down and you can tell like he figures out what is happening. And he realizes that she is wearing his face. And he is like simultaneously like, what the, like you could tell it is devastating to him, but then he registers how much it must be devastating to her.
Mm-hmm. It is really good. Sad moment as she cries over him and restores his face and hat before limping away to witness
she
the
did that
family.
she did that to make herself feel better. She was, just maybe cover this up a little bit.
I don't want to look at his jacked up face anymore. So she witnesses the Sawyer family having a spat about the terrible meat on the coked up pencil necks that they killed.
Coked up pencil necks. Now, that is no way to talk about Rick the Prick, okay? Rick the Prick was on his way to UT. He would have become a petroleum engineer. He would have... had high blood pressure and, died when he was like 63 or something.
That's right. He wasn't making it too far.
No way to talk about a great Texas guy like Rick the Prick.
We salute you, Rick the Prick. But the family standards demand only the best, which is why Drayton picks the meat, he says. I also love his ranting about being a small businessman and how the property taxes are stopping him from investing in repairs, and no wonder the place is crumbling around them. Like, it's just so funny for him to be acting like it's a normal business and not like they are crazy cannibal cooks.
So he meant, and Hooper said that they ran this as an amusement park at some point. So I guess he and LM got together and cooked up this backstory for them that they were running an amusement park. So Chop Top is I guess you could sell him as a ride operator. You know what I mean? Out of everybody in the family, I could certainly see that. But it's
got
insane.
His Sonny Bono wig on?
To me, yeah. And he's running the Rock and Roll Express.
Yeah, it's all working.
I mean, but what were they doing? So they left the house. They had to escape the house. And then they go to, I don't know what.
Texas Battleland, baby.
Did they travel around? Did they hang out with the Hills Have Eyes people for a little bit? Did they go to Us Fest and like have a food truck? What did they do in between, for a decade or whatever? Who knows?
I think somebody went to UT and got like an art degree based on all of the sculpture that's in their house in those
you're probably
14
right.
years.
Yeah.
It is also funny, you wonder like, which one of them did this? Which one of them made the sculptures?
Put all that together. Yeah, that was great to me. And that was what I was referring to earlier when they talked about how they had to hide all the lighting, was they just basically did that in all the sculptures and things, which I thought was really cool.
It works great. It looks great. It's super fun to just be like soaking in the environment.
Honestly, you have to watch this like 3 or 4 times before you really get the picture of what Texas Battleland or whatever it is called. It looks like and the way it is put together. Yeah. I mean, on first watch, it just looks like absolutely insane underground thing that was seeming like they just needed to dig and add on as they went. And maybe that is sort of the case, but it obviously was a structure at some point,
That's right. As Stretch tries to avoid these lads, she makes a break for another tunnel, but Drayton spots her. I love the physical performance of Leatherface here. It's so great. The nodding, yes, he saw it before switching to no, and then getting scared and switching back to yes.
So some booger just ran through here or whatever.
That's right. And Drayton sends him to check it out. Perfect silent character work. Meanwhile, Enright finds the wheelchair and skeleton of his nephew Franklin, skull sawn in half, which is a cool touch.
How are they transporting Franklin's whole body and leaving him in the wheelchair all this time?
It's fucked up. And also, I did laugh because I did, like I said, go back and rewatch the first one as well. Franklin very clearly drops the flashlight. And it's still in his death grip here in this movie. So basically, this is unwatchable.
This is I believe, like you referred to earlier, this is their flair for the arts.
Oh,
they knew
they
that
recreated it.
Putting the flashlight back into his bones would be a better character study for this particular tableau.
It's watchable again. I'm back in.
Thank you. It's the best.
That's right. The commentary had some interesting insights about this regarding Franklin's status as a representation of our treatment of Vietnam veterans. In the first movie, initially, where people feel uncomfortable around him, he is surly in return. He feels like a burden and people treat him as such. And now continuing to function as a representation of Vietnam veterans, where Chop Top glorifies the war with his costume and attempts to make Nam land, while the actual veterans are forgotten to gather dust here.
Oh, geez, yeah, I didn't even realize that. Yeah. I mean, even still, I can get it with Nubbins, and I get it with, the other members of the family that they're carting around, but
Sure.
It is kind of funny that they've got Franklin and his whole rig, and they're carrying him around from city to city.
From South Texas for 14 years. They trucked this guy around.
I wonder, maybe Nubbins told him, we saw it, we didn't see it on screen, but Nubbins was like, hey, you know what? I kind of like that wheelchair guy. He was actually kind of fun. He was the only one that was getting my vibe in the van that day.
Wow, that's a really good point. He said, bring him along. Stretches in a gaudy tunnel of lights and bone decor, but flees when she sees some chainsaw action, not realizing that it's Lefty. I love the vignettes set up in here, like the beachgoers. Bubba has the artist's soul. I gotta imagine it's him.
You think so?
Yeah.
I love that Lefty unwittingly scares her so many times. Like he chases her with his car, and then he's running around with a chainsaw, and she's like, "Oh no, it's a."
This is what I'm saying, man. He fucks her over time and time again.
But I do think I think it is intentionally, comical in a different way than like Chop Top or Leatherface or the dad, the real stuff that is like pushed in your face. I still think this is part of it. I mean, it's very like Looney Tunes-ish.
Oh, absolutely it is. One of Lefty's chainsaw sparks did light a huge fire that basically would have gotten their production shut down if one of the crew wasn't neighbors with the fire chief, and they basically just had to be done for the night instead.
Oh my God, brilliant.
He bursts in from a tunnel in front of her, chainsaw in hand, and sends her back the way she came, but Lefty is still chopping away and collapses the tunnel, trapping Stretch. I truly laugh out loud when she's like, all right, let's talk about it, to Leatherface.
Yeah. Even Leatherface is like, what the heck? He just stops because he can't believe that the roof fell down.
That's right. But the other Sawyers are hot on their heels, and Drayton is none too happy. Are you the saboteur fucking up my house?
Okay, he gets onto her. Meanwhile, Dennis Hopper's been running through that place, screaming at the top of his lungs for 20 minutes, running a giant chainsaw.
It's big.
And this guy, I'm telling you, this is no wonder that his business is failing. He's oblivious to what's happening around him. I mean, he's winning contests, but
that's true.
Hey,
you know what? You're allowed to be a fuck up when
he could be taking it to the next level. He could be taking it to the next level if he'd only just keep his own house in a little bit more order.
That's right. But after Chop Top reveals that this is the DJ Leatherface supposedly killed already once tonight, they realize it's about SCEX sex. Bubba's got a girlfriend. And he just shrugs bashfully.
His reaction, he literally rolls his eyes like, oh, this guy.
That's right. And Drayton says, well, it's a swindle. You got one choice, boy, sex or the saw. And sex is, well, nobody knows. But the saw is family. But Bubba won't do it. He hurts himself in despair, but stays true. Big ups to Buddy here. This does kind of play into that anti-sex rhetoric that had become so popular in Reagan-era culture, just more of Drayton representing that conservative America, chaste, literally doesn't understand sex, which lends an irony to his being pissed at Bubba for being curious and seeking it, saying you should have asked me, when he's like, well, nobody knows. Nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So instead, Chop Top knocks her out, and she awakens tied to the table, a la Sally in the first.
Again, I mean, yeah, a perfect, one-up of what happened in part one. I mean, just a wonderful raising of the stakes.
Absolutely it is. And a great look at just some more of the surroundings and tchotchkes, including a reference to Dr. Strangelove and the Slim Pickens-esque skeleton riding the bomb waving a cowboy hat. That's fun as hell.
Yeah, where was he? He would have been perfect in these.
Yeah. Grandpa has brought out a sprightly 137 and still as fast as Jesse James thanks to a strict liquid diet.
So they said, okay, so and you must have heard this as well. Tobe Hooper was like, oh, don't they used to say these blood drinkers, these slaughterhouse people live a long time. Well, come on, man.
They live forever, baby. They're vampires.
What the hell is he talking about?
Ken Evart, actually 34 at the time, buried under some crazy-ass makeup as Grandpa. They said that Tom Savini actually cast him, and they picked him because he was skinny as hell and had just like a fucked up, haunted look in his eyes that were very recessed because he was, quote, a tunnel rat in Vietnam, so he could sit still for hours and he had seen some fucked up shit, so he would be okay in the makeup chair. They also said that he had, like, been a victim of Agent Orange and had, like, weird open sores on his body that they had to work around. It's fucked up that this guy had to go through that.
Gee whiz, I mean, like, I don't know.
Yeah, man.
I don't know what to say to that one. Can we talk more about the guy getting axe murdered instead?
The cast had some really weird shit go on, man. He worked at Atlas until they went for automation, electrified cages, cold steel chutes, air-powered head hammers, so he went crazy with shame. Bubba sort of pleads for her to not get her head hammered in, but Drayton ain't having it. Turns into Bob Barker. Bring her on down, damn it!
Man, this Peter Boyle looking ass grandpa. He gets that hammer. He's so excited.
That's right. I also want to say that Bubba steals a smooch before dragging her over, despite his inner turmoil. I love that Drayton prays, oh, Grandma up in chainsaw heaven, please don't hoodoo the boy.
I mean, he's pretty much married to her at that point.
That's right. And the lead up is great because it's a perfect encapsulation of the tone. You know, there's legitimate tension as Stretch screams in terror as his feet, but they stretch it out with comedy. Like Grandpa getting distracted licking a ladle. He's unable to hold the weight of the hammer on his swing.
So funny.
You know, it's just really, really great. A small taste of blood wakes him up, though, as we see from the awful close-up of his face, and he does indeed hit her a few times. Drayton gets impatient, though, and takes the hammer and knocks her out. This inability to finish definitely aligns him metaphorically with that sexually frustrated angle of the rest of the Sawyers, as does Drayton's little speech. Just 4 impotent conservatives whose outlet is violence.
The close-up on the grandpa's face is amazing. I mean, it is right up in there. I didn't watch like the newest version or whatever, but it still looks amazing, and the camera's right on it. The sores on his face. I mean, it looks like, skin as close as you can get.
Watching them layer it on him, it was crazy to see it get put on.
Yeah, we can obviously go on and on about Savini, and he described the process, and he even, and I don't know if you remember, described like who had created that process, but in order to get it to look more realistic and to move around more realistically, putting it on in patches. Right. And I thought that was really impressive and a very fun little bit of movie trivia to learn.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, Lefty bursts in. There's like an interesting line in the sand here where he bursts in singing Bringing in the Sheaves, but also he's still like kind of late. He stops them from killing Stretch by interrupting, but this is his own vendetta, not him saving her, in quotes. And that's definitely made clear by the fact that she, B, took several hammer blows and is currently knocked the fuck out with her head in a bucket because he was too busy sawing the fucking foundation instead.
Bringing it all down.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Chop Top sings along.
Yeah.
I
Really
mean, there's
fun
no... You can't... There's
Music is my life, man.
Yeah. The only defining characteristic for him is that he will do the most absolutely insane thing possible.
Meanwhile, boys, 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 you never should have been doing this. Great line from Lefty. Drayton keeps thinking he's sent by a competitor. He says, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and from where I sit, there just ain't enough dogs. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the damn kitchen. Let's make a deal. The capitalist method of problem solving, pay him off.
He's got a big old fat stack of cash from when he was working the music festival circuit or whatever he did before opening a fucking Frontierland.
But Lefty is the lord of the harvest. Some new health food bunch? Great fucking line. And he's here to reap, spurred on by the weak recognition of Stretch, barely clinging to life in the bucket. So his chainsaw roars to life, and he saws Drayton in the ass before freeing Stretch to run. Small businessman always, always, always takes it in the ass, as Drayton reminds us.
That, again, this is on top of everything you've had to endure. The chainsaw to the crotch is just... one of the worst, okay? Again, as a kid, a young Dennis is sitting there watching this. All my bits are sort of just getting situated the way they're supposed to. And then I got to have the image in my brain of taking a chainsaw to him. You know what I mean?
Good.
Couldn't
Not
sleep
good.
that night.
Sure. The fight is on as our two chainsaw wielders do battle. It's amazing. Caroline described it as Douglas Fairbanks Jr., but with saws, which I love that description. It's highly choreographed. Bubba does eventually take a saw to the gut, and it's a wonderful effect as it fully pierces him. They, swivel him around to really give us a look. Yeah.
I mean, his stomach is absolutely shredded. It is such a great... I mean, if you really inspect it, it doesn't look realistic at all. I mean, not in a manner of it doesn't look like real skin or real blood or whatever. It just doesn't look realistic of what a person being cut open would look like. Mm-hmm. But it is totally fitting this movie and the tone. And it's the perfect time to do it when everything is just gone completely insane. Now you're just looking at this giant chainsaw that has pierced a man through, and he has these just shredded guts flying everywhere.
And that kind of disconnect from reality is what lets you buy that he fights on with this fucking chainsaw.
Oh, yeah, you totally believe it, yeah.
And Lefty moves to dual wielding his mini saws, which is delightful. Drayton cowers under the table, grabbing nubbins and revealing a hidden grenade stored in there, a just in case for just this case.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. And I mean, it's very funny. And again, it's another memorable line. I mean, maybe not exactly 100% appropriate nowadays, or even then, I don't know. But it's still on top of, lick my plate, dog dick, and, everything else. They give him a lot of really memorable one-liners.
Grandpa tries to help. He throws his hammer, accidentally hits Bubba. His chainsaw drops and saws Drayton in the ass once more, so he drops the grenade and it explodes in front of him.
Now, and you don't really see them, though, blow up.
True. It is off screen.
I don't know how to feel about that. I mean, part of me kind of wouldn't have minded seeing that, you know what I mean? But I also get how difficult that probably would have been.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with Savini there, who would have insisted on making it all realistic, fucking shrapnel and shit. He's like, we don't have time for this.
The limo guy squashes it again. Any kind of fun we want to have? We got a goon who rolls up in a limo, rolls down the window, and they're like, and then they're going to blow up and explode. And he puts his little finger out the window. And, no.
He crushed my Dr. Pepper, too. He spit it in my face.
Except this and this time we know a bunch of smoke comes out of the window because he's smoking all of John LaRoquette's, fake John LaRoquette's weed.
That's exactly right. Meanwhile, Stretch had fled with Chop Top on her tail. He's a nimble little rascal, and he does catch up, but she kicks him in the nuts and shocks his dome with a lamp, which is delightful.
Yeah.
An exit sign calls her name. A little callback to the station tour, EXIT. Though Chop Top wasn't stopped for long and pursues her to the peak. Scary shots, honestly, as you see how narrow and precarious these steps are while Chop Top slashes at her calves with his knife. I really like it.
Yeah, it's totally. I mean, it's very frightening. It's played very realistically. Again, it's really crazy to me that it's Chop Top in the final battle and not Leatherface, but it's not so much distracting that it takes me out of the movie or disappoints me in any way.
Yeah. Well, like they said, they want to see more of the monster, but they considered Chop Top to be the monster. So, and when we make it to the top, we finally see what's up there: a shrine to Grandma. Dead. I fucking forget that Grandma's in there every time. I come back to this movie once a year, and every time holy fuck, Grandma's up there. And then when I watched the first one again, I could not believe that Grandma's in the first one too. Which I fucking forgot about.
So where is Grandma in part one?
She's just in the room with Grandpa when they first encounter him. She's just in a chair facing him.
Okay. Well, she looks radiant. She's right up there in the place of honor where she should be. And I assume she was there probably the entire time the amusement park was up and running.
I think so. And he says, "Dead end, girl. Dead end city." He gloats, cutting his own throat to draw blood and scare her. As they mentioned, they thrive on fear. But when Stretch grabs for Grandma's chainsaw, he panics and runs over. Amazing when you realize Grandma is alive in quotes, question mark. Although not for long, as she dies from the violent yanking, her head sinks a little more and she gives up one final breath.
Unfortunately, she seems neglected. If that's the case, if she was still living, they definitely weren't taking as good a care of her as they were Grandpa.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Then again, he was working in the slaughterhouse, and we all know how those guys lived a long time.
That's right. So. They drank blood and they live forever. That's how it goes. Now, Chop Top slashes away, but she finally gets the chainsaw started, slices open his guts, and knocks him from the peak. Victory, also a crazy fucking stunt that this stuntman does, falling down this side of the mountain here. Almost fucking could have chopped his damn head off with that tunnel that he goes, just a metal tunnel that he falls through.
Falls right into it. Very impressive.
Stretch screams in triumph, and she does the Leatherface dance with the chainsaw. It is interesting to be much like Sally at the end, she has sort of descended into madness. It does feel like maybe she could start a new Saw family. She could be the new grandma to a family of Saw wielders. There's also a great tattered Texas flag at the top, waving proudly. It's a great final shot of one of the all-time great final girls. Also, from the feminist reading of the movie, it is interesting that it's another woman who enables Stretch to achieve this victory, providing a weapon to fight back with, considering how few women are in the movie, period. Just an interesting touch, and strange things happen, plays over the ending.
It's amazing, and it's so great. And again, it speaks to the difference between 1 and 2. In part 1, we see her escape and she jumps in the back of the truck and, she's obviously affected and there's a sense of terror, but also joy and maybe a mix of both. And then with Stretch, she's literally on top of a freaking mountain, dancing around with that chainsaw, just looking like an ultimate badass.
Absolutely. And now, Dennis, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up why it's not just a good horror movie, but is in fact the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
Right on. So, real heads know the 80s is the golden age of horror movies. And this one, it gives you everything from an 80s horror movie standpoint and more. Okay? Tobe Hooper, he claims that he invented the final girl in Chainsaw 1. Is that true? Hey, I don't know. It might be as true as the drinking blood thing, but that doesn't matter because in this one, he gave us one of the best final girls of all time in Stretch. She is one of the coolest. She's very, she's attractive, but she's also tough. She handles Crazy Lefty and she handles the whole Sawyer family. All right. She was a radio DJ. Okay. One of the coolest jobs you could have in the 80s. And I just want to give a quick shout out to the radio set. It was totally cool. One of the all-time top radio station sets in a movie. All right. You get Tom Savini. Okay. He's the top guy in gore. He will never be beat. There will never be another Tom Savini. You have amazing design, the set design. In the interviews, all of the cast members that were interviewed bragged about how amazing the set design was. And they did this while they got this Golan Globus goon breathing down the back of their necks every day from his fucking limousine, okay? You have new things that you see every time you watch this. You know, when you're looking at Battleground Land and you're seeing the sculptures, you see the smokehouse made out of skulls and bones and stuff like that. It's got humor. It has, again, real fans know that every great horror movie has humor, and this one has some of the best. I don't know any other, horror comedy that pulls it off in this fashion. It is extreme, it is dark, and at times it is very slapsticky, and just very goofy. It will scare you. Leatherface and Stretch's first meeting is absolutely terrifying. Any of the interactions between them two is very scary. This is some of the scariest parts of the movie. The scene between Stretch and LG is a living nightmare. You are wearing another person's skin, and it's your friend and coworker and a person you're close with. That is terrifying. You have a crazed Dennis Hopper, okay? He's going around chopping stuff up, screaming at the top of his lungs. He looks crazy.
He's singing hymns at you.
I'm obligated to pump up other Dennises, so I have to, praise his. But anyways, so all this stuff happens. At no point during this movie are they trying to be a crowd pleaser, and it is still the best horror movie of all time.
Hell yeah. Couldn't have put it better myself, but I'm going to try. To me, this is the best horror movie ever made because Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to me, is a 5-star movie. And when somebody says, hey, Tobe Hooper, we would like you to follow up a 5-star movie, you cannot just recreate it. We see this with Jaws 2. It's just a diminished version of Jaws. And that, in my opinion, makes it the second worst of the Jaws movies. Because it is just a pale imitation of one of the best ever made. And Tobe Hooper is smart enough to know that he cannot do this. He knows it needs to be different. And for him to so successfully make something different that it is also a 5-star movie is truly mind-boggling. And for it to, we talked about this a little bit at the top, but for it to actively subvert audience expectations as a comedy-first splatterfest compared to the grueling endurance test of the deceptively gore-shy original, it's prompted in part by a satirical mocking of the exploding trend of sequels, and even us, the audience, for being interested in a sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Toby's like, that's crazy that you want to follow up. And so this manifests in Toby, much like his appropriately named stand-in Lefty, shouting, bring it all down, and having an attitude of trying to end this franchise before it starts, and sawing at the foundation by killing all of the Sawyers. This rejection of being siloed, despite economic pressure, is something that I have really always admired. And it feels a lot like one of my other favorite horror movies, Fire Walk with Me. There's such a clear path forward for Fire Walk with Me in terms of David Lynch finished Twin Peaks. There's a movie coming out. The obvious answer is what happened after the cliffhanger ending of Twin Peaks. And instead he says, here's a heartbreaking prequel that leads to the inevitable death of the protagonist that starts the series. You know where this ends. We're going to do this complete opposite thing that people expect. Tobe Hooper says, you want another genre-defining horror movie? Here's a comedy about Reagan-era culture and America's exploitation of violent capitalism. They're both taking the thing we didn't know we wanted, or for some people, honestly do not want and fully reject, but giving it to us anyway because they know that it's the right thing to do for the franchise and for the artistry of the original and the new one. But I find it also equally as interesting that it did not actually end the franchise. That despite these efforts, that it was unsuccessful. It kind of, it hasn't happened yet, but I would be very, very surprised if Halloween Ends was actually the end of the Halloween franchise. It's just too valuable of a property. It will get resurrected at some point. But the movie itself is marred by obvious studio interference in their attempt to break free a la Halloween 3. The ending of it features a rightfully vindictive and deliberate massacre of Michael. And it really feels like it is as much beholden to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 as it is to Halloween 3. In that it is like someone trying to wrest control of a franchise that they've invested a lot of themselves into and say, here's my authorial stamp. I'm trying to not allow corporate interest to dictate what it's going to look like. I think Matrix 4 does this as well. Basically, I just find this refusal to be pigeonholed, but leveraging the mechanism of pigeonholing to tell that story very, very interesting. So that's just a movie on like a 1,000-foot view of just like what it is as a movie. To say nothing of, as you mentioned, the insane gore effects from Savini, the incredible performances by literally everyone in this movie. There is not a single bad performance that I can point to, in my opinion. I think that they all do exactly what the movie needs. The set design is unreal. They spent a fortune on it, and it totally shows. I think that it's totally transformative. It totally puts you into the place. You feel brought into the world, and you feel like you are Stretch, basically, being brought into this hell world, the same way that she does when she finds old Chrome Dome out there waiting in the radio lobby. It's just a fucking incredible horror movie. It does comedy and scares well at the same time. You can't beat it. You can't fucking beat it.
You never will.
You never will. Dennis, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was an absolute blast. Please tell the people where they can check out your show, find you,
of
all
course.
that stuff.
Watch Guys Gotti, Gotta, on YouTube. That will take you a while, but once you get through all those episodes, do yourself a favor and listen to every episode that George put out. He's made so many good ones on so many great movies. Turned me on to a lot of good movies as well.
Hell yeah. Well, that's the goal. I definitely want to encourage people to check out Guys Gotta Gotti. As I have mentioned, every time one of them have been on the show, I love it. I find it absolutely hilarious. I am so grateful that they let me force myself onto the show, basically.
Well, thank you so much for your support, George.
Yes, absolutely. As far as my plugs, there's 5 episodes left. That's crazy. So, you know, we're locked in. All the guests are picked.
Wow.
Yeah, which is also crazy. We'll be spotlighting some cool Philadelphians in August. And then finally, Plutember will close us out. The Ember part of Plutember was always meant to be September and not December. Turns out I've just been late every year. So look forward to the triumphant return. Another plug, October 20th. That is a Sunday, unfortunately. I know that's annoying. But we will be having the quote-unquote secret live show finale. I don't really intend to release this anywhere to make it special for Philly and Philly-adjacent people. But at Philomoka again on October 20th, we'll be having a lot of cool former guests come through to do several mini episodes about movies that I'm shocked didn't make the list. So we'll have a fun presentation there. A.T. Pratt, the awesome artist and former guest, will be there as well. He'll be selling a brand new poster. We originally have the poster for the first 100 horror movies picked for this show. Andy is hard at work on the second 100 horror movies, putting that together into a second poster, which I'm thrilled to see. One of my favorite things about the show is that it was able to prompt such incredible art, and for that I'm very excited.
Very cool. And he was a good episode. He's a great episode.
Hell yeah, I love his Eraserhead episode. His Choose Your Own Adventure of You Are a Shark is just like, it makes me laugh so fucking much. Great ep that I highly encourage people to go check out. But yeah, if you're in Philly, keep an eye out for more information about that. October 20th, that'll be happening at Philomoka. My goal is for it to just be free with, like, you know, maybe suggested donation of $5 to help cover the cost of renting the venue, because I do want this to be something that's accessible for people in the area. So I hope to see you all there. That's it. Thanks. Bye.